Welcome back, explorers, to Whoosh Tales, the home of the greatest kids' adventure stories anywhere on the internet, bringing you a brand new English story for children every single week. This is episode 12. And if you have followed Finn Walker since the very first night the sky cracked open over Stonehaven Village, you already know that we have traveled an extraordinarily long way together. The edge of the world, deep space, the hidden city under the sea, the living forest, the breathing mountain, the room where Caleb waited 11 years, the Mediterranean meadow where Anya had waited 42 years, the long, quiet kitchen table evening where old Thomas finally told the full truth about their grandfather, the descent to the spiral passage, past the presence in the alcove, down to the deepest place any human has ever been. 12 episodes of careful work, careful love, careful steps forward into the unknown. All of it has been leading to this morning. The morning 2 10-year-old brothers wake up in a small natural alcove just beyond the final archway, get up, dust themselves off, and walk into the chamber at the heart of the world. Finn woke first. He lay on his side for a long moment on his folded jacket and looked at the soft natural luminescence of the rock around him. The faintest glow that filled this deepest place even without Caleb's light, the slow, patient internal warmth of a planet's geological center. And he thought, very simply, today is the day. Then he sat up. Caleb was already awake. He was sitting cross-legged with his back against the wall of the alcove, his eyes open, the soft amber gold of his skin held to a steady low level, so that the alcove was bathed in his gentle light. He looked at Finn and smiled the small, careful smile that Finn had come to understand was Caleb's particular way of saying, I am here and I am ready. Finn smiled back. They got up. They drank the last of the water from Caleb's small flask. They folded their jackets and tucked them into their backpacks because they did not know how long they would be inside the chamber, and there was no point in carrying anything they were not going to need. Then they walked out of the alcove together, beneath the final low natural archway in the rock, and into the chamber at the heart of the world. Finn stopped in the entrance. He had to. The chamber was so much more than what he had expected that his body required a moment to simply receive it before continuing forward. It was vast, but not in the way the mountain's upper chamber had been vast. The mountain's upper chamber had been impressive in scale, with its towering invisible ceiling, and its circle of compressed light columns, and its great geological pulse beneath the floor. This chamber was vast in a different way. It was perfectly round, perhaps 50 meters across at the floor, and its ceiling rose in a slow, gentle dome to a height that Finn estimated at perhaps 30 meters at the center, every surface smoothed by the patient hand of 3,000 years of mineral water and the slow shifting of the deep plates of the earth. The walls were a color Finn could not name precisely, somewhere between the warm copper of very old coins and the gentle rose of the inside of a seashell and the deep glow of embers just before they fade into ash. And every surface of the chamber, every centimeter of the curving walls and the gently domed ceiling and the smooth, perfect floor gave off a soft, natural glow of its own, the way the very deepest geological places sometimes do, the unhurried internal light of stone that has been close to the heart of a planet for so long that some of that heart's warmth has slowly settled into the stone itself. In the center of the chamber, two things waited. The first was a small, simple stone bench, perhaps 1.5 meters long, carved very plainly out of the floor, as if the rock itself had been gently shaped into a seat without any sense of formality or grandeur. On the bench, neatly arranged, an old wool jacket, folded carefully, an old walking stick, leaning against the bench's side, a blue wool scarf, folded with great deliberateness. The same items their grandfather had left on the high moor on the cold November morning 10 years ago, except they had not been left. They had been brought down here, too. The way a person who knows he is going to settle in for a long stay brings the small familiar things that have meant comfort to him in his life. They had been waiting on this small stone bench for 10 years. Beside the jacket, the small device their grandfather had built with his own hands in the last 3 years of his life, a small open clay sphere about the size of an apple, glowing faintly amber, the warm, slowly fading presence of a man whose love had outlasted his body, contained and continuing to release itself into the chamber at the slow, patient rate it had been releasing for a decade. The second thing in the chamber was the creature. Finn had thought about this moment carefully on the way down. He had pictured the creature in his mind dozens of times. He had imagined something large and ancient and visibly trapped, something dramatic, something that would make the act of helping it obvious and physical. The actual creature in front of him was nothing like that. It was small. It was perhaps half a meter across, lying on the smooth floor of the chamber in a gentle curl, like a sleeping cat. It glowed very faintly with its own internal warm light, the same amber gold quality as Caleb's, but dimmer, almost flickering at the edges where the light met the surrounding air, the visible sign of a presence that had been holding on for 3,000 years, but had been doing so on increasingly limited reserves. Its body was difficult to describe, because the body was not really a body in the way Finn was used to thinking of bodies. It was something between a small fox and a much smaller version of Ember and a folded blanket of living light, all of those things together and none of them entirely. 2 soft eyes were closed. The slow rhythm of its breathing was the only movement in the entire chamber. And around the creature, in a circle of perhaps 3 meters, the warm, steady presence of their grandfather. Finn could feel it as clearly as if a person he knew well was standing in the chamber with them. He could feel the particular shape of the man, the careful, patient quality of his attention, the steady, gentle goodness of his love, the small, thoughtful presence old Thomas had described to them around the kitchen table, all of it still present in the chamber and held there by the slowly fading device on the bench. Their grandfather had been keeping company with the trapped creature for 10 years. He had been doing it through his presence impression, gentle and continuous, never demanding anything, never trying to do anything dramatic, just being there. The way you sit with a friend who is going through a hard time, the way you stay in a room with someone who is sick, just present, just there. Caleb had stopped beside Finn at the entrance and was looking at all of it the way Caleb looked at important things, with his full, unhurried attention. Then he reached over and took Finn's hand. They walked forward together into the chamber. They walked slowly. They were not in a hurry. There was something about the chamber that made hurrying feel deeply inappropriate, the way hurrying through a sleeping room feels inappropriate. They walked across the smooth, glowing floor toward the small stone bench and the curled creature and the slowly fading device. And as they walked, the warm presence of their grandfather grew stronger around them, gentler and closer and more particular, until by the time they reached the bench, Finn felt as if he was standing beside his grandfather in the way you stand beside someone in a small room, close enough to feel their attention on you, close enough to know, without needing to look, that they are there. Caleb knelt down beside the creature first. Finn knelt beside him. The creature did not open its eyes. It was very deeply asleep, the kind of sleep that exhausted things sleep, the kind of sleep a small animal sleeps in front of a warm hearth after a long, cold day outside. Caleb looked at it for a long time without moving. Then he placed his open hand on the smooth chamber floor about a foot from the curled creature, not touching it, just present beside it. The amber gold glow of his skin came up gently, not bright, not insistent, and began to extend outward across the floor in a slow, careful wave of warm light, the way a candle's glow gradually fills a room when you bring the candle in. Caleb's light reached the curled creature and gently surrounded it without crossing into it. It made an offering of itself. It did not push. The creature's breathing changed. The slight flicker at the edges of its own internal glow steadied. It did not wake. It simply received what Caleb was offering with the quiet gratitude of something that had been waiting an extraordinarily long time for this exact kind of help. Caleb sat very still and held the light steady. Finn watched his brother's face and saw, for the first time, what Caleb at his full purpose looked like: calm, completely focused, entirely without ego or self-consciousness, simply present and giving. The face of a child who had spent 11 years in a small, warm room being patiently prepared for exactly this moment, and who had now arrived in it, and who was performing his task with the deep, unhurried grace of someone who had been built for it. While Caleb worked, Finn turned to the stone bench. He reached out and touched the old jacket folded there. The fabric was soft and slightly worn at the cuffs. It smelled very faintly of pipe smoke and the particular soap his grandfather had always used, a smell Finn had not consciously known he remembered, but which his body recognized instantly the way bodies recognize certain smells from very early childhood. He picked up the blue wool scarf and held it in his hands. He pressed it briefly against his face. The smell on the scarf was a little stronger. He closed his eyes. The presence in the chamber moved slightly, not visibly. There was no visible movement, but Finn felt it. The warm, steady, careful attention of his grandfather had been distributed evenly around the curled creature for 10 years, and now a small portion of it had turned to focus on Finn. Specifically, the way a person in a quiet room becomes aware that someone they love has come in. "Hello," Finn said quietly. He had not planned to speak. The words simply came out, the way certain words do when they need to. His voice was small in the great chamber, but it carried. "Hello, grandfather." The presence settled gently around him. There were no words. There would not be words. The presence impression was not capable of new speech, only of the slow, steady release of what had been impressed into it 10 years ago. But what it had been impressed with was love. The simple, complete, unconditional love of an old man for the grandchildren he would not be alive to see grow up. The love of a man who had stopped to look carefully at every small thing in his life, including the small grandson he had only known for a year, and had held that grandson in his mind and his heart with the same careful attention he gave to everything. The presence was that love. The presence had been holding that love steady for a decade, releasing it slowly into the chamber, comforting the trapped creature with it. And now some of that love settled gently and completely around Finn. Finn began to cry, not noisy crying, the quiet, steady kind that arrives when something you've been carrying alone for a long time, without knowing you were carrying it, is finally received by the person it has been meant for. He had grieved his grandfather as a baby in the unknowing way babies grieve absences they cannot name. He had grieved him as a small child in the abstract way small children grieve people they have only been told about. He had grieved him at the kitchen table the night old Thomas told the full truth. And now, in this chamber at the heart of the world, with a small device on the bench releasing his grandfather's love into the air around him, Finn finally grieved him properly, not as the absent of a person he had never known, but as the present of a person who had loved him completely from the day he was born, and had then gone away to keep a stranger company in the dark, and had still, somehow, never stopped loving him from there. He sat down on the smooth chamber floor, beside Caleb. He kept the blue scarf in his hands. He let himself cry as long as he needed to. Caleb continued to hold his light, steady around the curled creature. The presence stayed gently around Finn. The chamber held all of them. There was no rush. After a long time, Finn put the scarf carefully on his lap and wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked at Caleb. Caleb met his eyes. "I am ready," Caleb said quietly. "Whenever you are." Finn nodded. He understood what his brother meant. The reason they had come down here was not just to comfort the creature in the dark. It was to bring it the light it needed. The full light. The proper light. The light that would be enough to last the creature for a very long time after they left. The light that would mean their grandfather's small fading device would not need to keep working anymore. That his presence could be released from its long, quiet labor. That the work could finally be finished. Caleb closed his eyes. He pulled his light inward to his sternum the way Anya had taught him. He held it there. He breathed slowly. Then, with the careful precision he had been practicing for weeks, he began to release it, not in a sudden burst. Slowly, steadily, the way Anya had healed the wilted thyme stem in the Mediterranean meadow. He opened his palms upward. The amber gold light of his held sunlight rose from his hands in a slow, spiraling column, climbing into the chamber air, gathering above the curled creature in a softly glowing cloud. The cloud grew. Caleb continued to release. He was not draining himself. He had spent weeks learning to hold and release without overextending, and his careful preparation showed now in the steadiness of his work. But he was giving generously, the way you give generously to something that genuinely needs everything you can spare. The cloud above the curled creature grew bright and warm. Then very gently it descended. It settled around the creature in a slow, careful drift, surrounding it the way warm light surrounds a sleeping child you are tucking in at night. The creature's small internal glow brightened. The flickering at its edges steadied and then strengthened. Its slow breathing deepened. After a long moment, its eyes opened, very slowly, for the first time in 3,000 years. The eyes were the same warm amber gold as Caleb's light. They blinked once. They looked at Caleb. They looked at Finn. They looked at the small device on the bench and at the presence of their grandfather around the chamber. And the creature made a sound. The first sound it had made in 3,000 years. A small, soft vocalization that was something between a sigh and a cat's quiet greeting purr, the gentle, wordless sound of a being who had been waiting for this morning longer than any human could properly imagine and had now been met by it. Caleb extended one hand slowly toward the creature. The creature reached its small body up and pressed the top of its head gently against Caleb's palm in a gesture of acknowledgement and thanks that needed no translation. Caleb's light continued to gently nourish it. After perhaps a minute, the creature settled back onto the smooth chamber floor with a small, contented sound and curled itself again, this time with a brightness to its internal glow that was steady and strong and required no external maintenance to keep going. It had been refilled. It would be all right now. It would be all right for thousands of years. Caleb sat back on his heels. He was a little tired from the giving, but he was not depleted, and Finn could see in his brother's face the quiet satisfaction of someone who had done exactly what he had been built to do and had done it well. They both looked at the small, fading device on the stone bench. The slow, continuous release of their grandfather's presence had been steady around them for the past hour. The presence was warm and close. But now there was an unspoken understanding in the chamber, shared between the brothers and the device and the presence itself. The work was done. The creature did not need the presence anymore. Caleb's light would carry it forward. Their grandfather, who had given a decade of his patient love to a strange in the dark, could finally rest. Finn stood up. He walked over to the bench. He picked up the small clay sphere gently with both hands. It was warm. The faint amber glow pulsed slightly inside it as his fingers wrapped around it. He held it in front of him at the height of his heart, and he spoke quietly into the chamber. "Grandfather," he said, "we have come. Caleb and I, we are here. We will take it from here. You can rest now." He paused. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for staying. Thank you for everything you built so that we could be the ones to finish this. I love you. We love you. Go gently." He pressed the small device softly against his chest for a long moment. The warm presence in the chamber gathered itself around him one last time, gentle and complete and full of recognition, and then, slowly, carefully, with the same patient grace it had used for a decade, it dispersed into the chamber air and was gone. The device in Finn's hands went quiet. Its faint amber glow faded to nothing. It had finished its work. Finn held the empty clay sphere in his hands and stood very still and let the quiet of the chamber settle into him. Caleb came and stood beside him without speaking, and after a moment Caleb put his arm around Finn's shoulders, and Finn put his arm around Caleb's shoulders, and the two brothers stood together in the chamber at the heart of the world with the small empty clay sphere between them and the small contented creature glowing warmly on the floor, and felt, for the first time, the full completed shape of what their grandfather had built across the last decade of his life, and the first decade of theirs. After a long, quiet time, they got ready to leave. Finn placed a small clay sphere carefully back on the stone bench beside the folded jacket and the walking stick and the blue scarf. Some things, he understood, were meant to stay in the places where their work had been done. The small device had served its purpose. It belonged to the chamber now. He picked up the blue scarf, however, and tucked it gently into the front of his jumper. That, he thought, his grandfather would have wanted him to keep. The curled creature watched them prepare to leave with its warm amber eyes open and quiet. As they walked toward the entrance archway, it sat up gently and stretched the way a cat stretches after a long sleep. Small front paws extended, back arched slowly, the soft, full motion of a being whose body has finally remembered what comfort feels like. Then it settled again on the floor. It was content. It was full. It would be there in this chamber for as long as it needed to be, gently glowing on its own, well and whole. Finn and Caleb walked out of the chamber side by side. Neither of them looked back. There was no need. The work was done. The chamber would continue to be itself behind them, warm and round and softly glowing, with the small creature peaceful on its floor in the jacket and stick and scarf and quiet, empty clay sphere on the bench, for a very long time. Their grandfather's labor had been completed. Their own had been added to the foundation of the world. And that the lesson at the heart of this kid's adventure story for explorers is the deepest lesson of all the lessons these stories have offered. Sometimes love does not look the way you expect it to look. Sometimes it looks like an old man walking down into a dark chamber alone to keep a stranger company. Sometimes it looks like a small clay device patiently releasing a person's presence into the world for 10 years after their body has been gone. Sometimes it looks like a brother quietly waiting 11 years in a warm room with 1,000 books and a single steady candle. Sometimes it looks like an old woman sitting beneath an olive tree in a meadow for 42 years. And sometimes it looks like two 10-year-old boys walking down into the heart of the world together to finish a piece of work that someone they loved had started and could not finish themselves. All of those are love. All of them are quiet. All of them are real. And the moral of all of them, for you watching this from wherever you are watching, is simply this. Be on the lookout for the quiet forms of love in your own life, the ones nobody is photographing, the ones nobody is announcing, the small, steady, patient ones. They are the ones that hold the whole world together. They always have been. Honor them, receive them gratefully, and when your own time comes, give them, hey, explorers. If you walked into the chamber at the heart of the world with Finn and Caleb today and stood there for the full quiet moment of meeting their grandfather and meeting the creature for the very first time, give this video the biggest thumbs up you have ever given anything, because you have absolutely earned every single moment of it. Our comment question today is one of the most heartfelt we have ever asked. If you would say one thing right now to someone you love who is no longer with you in the way they used to be, what would you most want them to know? Write it in the comments below. Every single message will be read with deep care. Subscribe to Whoosh Tales right now and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single adventure story for kids. Because next week the brothers begin the long climb back up to the surface. But something has followed them out of the chamber. Something gentle. Something they did not realize they were bringing with them. And the surface world above the mountain is going to look very different the next time they see it. We will see you next week, explorers. Hush! The long climb back up out of the chamber was made in companionable silence. The presence guardian in the alcove acknowledged them with a soft brush of attention as they passed, and let them through without question. The spiral passage was easier going up than down. The underground river was as warm and restorative on the way home as it had been on the way out. They reached the chamber of amber columns just as a deep weariness was beginning to settle into both their bodies, and the mountain itself seemed to know it because the columns brightened gently around them, and the great geological pulse beneath the floor warmed slightly as they crossed it, the way a friend's house warms slightly when you come back to it from a long, cold journey. They walked the final long, curving passage upward in the warm, rich amber gold mineral light. And when at last they pressed the original compass against the inside of the cliff door, and the door opened outward onto the granite ledge, and the cold, clean highland evening air rolling over them, they stopped in the doorway, the two of them side by side, and they breathed the surface air for the first time in 2 days, and they looked out across the valley below them in the deep pink-gold light of late sunset. And Finn looked at Caleb, and Caleb looked at Finn, and they both said, at exactly the same time, simply, home. Old Thomas was waiting on the ledge with Ember curled beside him. Nora was a tiny figure climbing the path up to meet them. The first stars were just beginning to appear over the eastern hills. And in Finn's jumper, gently warming against his chest, the soft folded weight of a blue wool scarf, the only thing he brought up out of the heart of the world.